Hi there and welcome back to the channel. At the recent PSD conference, the Prime Minister of Portugal, Luis Montenegro, announced 7 new government initiatives. Among them was the plan to open 2 new migrant welcoming centres in Portugal. Let's discuss it. So these 2 new migrant centres due to be opened in Porto and another one in Lisbon are basically to provide temporary accommodation for migrants in those cities. And it can be legal migrants, illegal migrants, or migrants who are undocumented, or indeed people who are in an unregularized situation. Those could be, for example, the people who came here on tourist visas seeking to do manifestation of interest, and then that collapsed on them and now they're just stuck here. So basically legal, illegal, undocumented, everybody is included and they can all go into these migrant reception centres. Now I have a question. If someone is an illegal migrant or an undocumented migrant or something like that, why are they going to go to one of these centres to live there if they feel that they're going to be deported as a result, if they feel that they're going to be caught by the authorities and then they might face deportation, as naturally you would assume would be the case? So my answer to that is that they mustn't be. I guess that the plan of the government is simply not to do that. If they identify somebody as being an illegal migrant, then they're not going to send them back, because the moment they start doing that, the moment the first or the second migrant that's illegal goes to one of these centres and has that kind of problem, word of it is going to spread like wildfire among the migrant community. These people communicate. They're not stupid or something. They did, after all, travel half the world to get here. They have some initiative. They're going to know. And the moment any one of them that's illegal meets some kind of negativity by going to one of these temporary reception centres, nobody else in that situation is going to go. You'll never see another illegal there. Or I have to be like the worst informed illegal ever. So, I think that the government plans to set up these centres and then basically treat everybody equally and not ask too many questions, to be honest. I think that that is probably the plan. And I do not agree with it. The reason I do not agree with it is because I fundamentally believe that legal migrants who've come here legally and who can contribute to the economy, and I think that it should be necessary for the companies that employ them to demonstrate why they need migrants to work. But if they can fulfill all of those requirements, and if they can support themselves financially, then I think that they can remain in Portugal and therefore the EU. Then that's fine, it's ideal. However, if they can't, if they're illegal, if they're undocumented, if they have an unregularized situation, as the Prime Minister says, then they need to be sent back. They need to be identified and then sent back to their own country. And that's what these centres should be for. But in my mind, there's no way that they can operate in that kind of way, because they're not coercive. They're inviting people to go there and seek temporary accommodation. So it's a voluntary thing. So it's a little bit confusing. I don't understand the real purpose of it. And even the mayor of Porto said he was a bit confused about, exactly what the government wanted to achieve here. He seems to think that it's just to create, conditions of more humanity for the migrants, to make them live in a more comfortable set of circumstances, because many of them, the poorest of them, the most illegal of them probably, are living in homeless conditions in Porto, sleeping under bridges, as he pointed out. And that's not good. It's not good for them, and it's not good for the city, the image of the city. Porto is a city which obviously receives a lot of tourists. You don't want to see lots of homeless people sleeping under bridges, and it can feed into crime and all kinds of things like that. So I understand his desire to clean it up, but I don't know what the government's intent here is. The Prime Minister didn't make it clear, and the Mayor of Porto also doesn't understand it. I also wonder why it's a priority, why it's one of the government's 7 priorities to set up this kind of migrant reception centre and to pay the cost, which must be in the tens of millions, for establishing and running each of these centres. Why is that the priority? I don't get it. I really don't. I think the priority needs to be catching people and sending them home. I mean, let's invest the millions in that. Or stopping people coming in the first place, cracking down on the organised crime rings, the human traffickers who are bringing many of these migrants to the country. Shouldn't that be the priority? Why wasn't that one of the 7 points that Luis Montenegro announced? Why is he focusing on accommodation reception centres to make people who are here illegally more comfortable? I mean, I know it sounds bad, but the idea of making people who are here illegally more comfortable isn't exactly good. I mean, it's not going to disincentivize them from coming, is it? Don't go to Portugal, guys, because the government's got a reception centre there and it's quite comfortable for you. Why is that going to scare people away? No, you need to create a hostile environment for illegal immigration in order to deter it in the first place and to remove it where it is present. You don't want to create expensive hotel-like reception centres for illegal immigrants and undocumented immigrants where they can lead their lives comfortably. I don't think that sends the right message. I really don't. The priority should be on deportations. The Mayor of Porto, an independent, he's not affiliated with one of the major parties, and his name is Rui Moreira. He has the opinion that the migrants can be taken to these centres and we can see whether or not their situation can be legalised. Now, I've already said that if they're illegal, they're probably not going to go to the centres of their own volition anyway. But I also think we have to look at the data. I mean, let's take a serious look at the data from IMA and see, how many people, how many migrants were actually asked to leave Portugal and how many of them were coercively or forcibly returned. And you can see that there's a big difference between the two numbers. Over 1,200 people were subject to basically removal orders, and just over 300 were actually sent out. And this is reflected at the European level, as you can see the information on the screen from Eurostat, like basically 100,000 cases of people who were given deportation orders, but it's basically around 30,000 that were actually removed from the EU. And this is a story which is replicated obviously across Europe, and Portugal is no exception to this. The fact that cases of illegals are identified doesn't mean that much. They still stay. Even after they've received multiple deportation orders, they can still be here, and even if they are deported, they can come back. But it doesn't solve the problem. One point where I fundamentally disagree with the president of the Câmara Municipal of Porto about is simply that he has this view that multiculturalism is fantastic, and he's not prepared to listen to any kind of arguments that it hasn't been successful. He has basically said that people don't understand multiculturalism, they don't get the benefits of it. That's because normal people, not him, because he's not a normal person, he's a very wealthy individual who probably lives in an exclusive neighbourhood and in a nice social bubble. But normal people in Portugal, they definitely feel the ill effects of multiculturalism as well as any benefits. Angela Merkel in 2010 famously said that multiculturalism has failed. As recently as this year, Mr. Barroso, the former Prime Minister of Portugal and President of the European Commission, has announced that there were limits to multiculturalism and the EU peoples didn't want more immigration. Finally, I think some people are waking up and realising this fact. But it's not the case for the president of the Câmara Municipal of Porto, unfortunately. He still thinks that more multiculturalism is the answer, more immigration is good. He also thinks that the city belongs to everybody. Public spaces belong to everybody equally, regardless of whether a person was born here or their family has lived here for generations, or whether they just turned up and they've spent a couple of nights here. It doesn't matter. The city and the public spaces belong to everyone equally. Well, essentially, I don't agree with that at all. I think that the public spaces are, of course, the property of the municipality, and the municipality has been paid for by the contributions of taxpayers, Portuguese taxpayers, for decades and even for centuries. And the concept that people who've basically just come into the country basically for an instant and they're maybe here illegally without a job or any source of income or anything like that, the idea that that kind of person has an equal stake to someone who's been working here and their family's been here for generations, to me is just ludicrous. I think that people like Mr. Moreira, the president of the Câmara Municipal of Porto, need to have a bit of reality check. And I think if I was a voter in Portugal, I would look at these kind of comments and I would say, hang on a minute, do I really want to vote for this guy? Because he thinks the city belongs to the world. He doesn't think it belongs to the people who pay the taxes or the people who actually voted for him or the citizens here. He thinks it belongs to anybody who just happens to rock up in Porto and spend a couple of nights under a bridge. Now, I mean, it's a point of view. If that's his point of view, that's fine. But I don't think it's a point of view that most people in Porto, most Portuguese people in Porto share. I don't think that they believe that their city belongs to everybody. I've lived in Portugal for over 3 years. Legally, I can economically support myself easily, and I'm an EU citizen. But I don't regard myself as being as Portuguese as someone who's lived here all their life and was born here or whose family has been here for generations. Absolutely not. It's just ridiculous. Even if I stay here for, another decade and I become Portuguese, I still won't be the same. And I think we have to admit that fact. It's not the case that Portugal or Portuguese cities belong to everyone, that they belong to the world and there's an open invite for anybody to come. I think that that is fundamentally a very, very flawed message, and it's not something that we should be putting out there because it would just attract more and more migrants to come, and to be honest, there are already more than enough. There are more than the country can possibly handle, and many of the migrants themselves are living in terrible conditions of joblessness and poverty, as you can see in some of my other videos and even upcoming videos on the migrant hostel. And I really think it's time to just say enough is enough. We need to focus on removing these people who are here illegally. We need to focus on deportations. We don't need to focus on building fancy and expensive migrant accommodation centres to make them comfortable. We don't need to send the message that Porto or Lisbon belong to the world. Come on, come one, come all. These are the wrong things to be communicating, and they will exacerbate the problem. All right, well, I hope people found that video/rant informative and interesting. I will see you soon in the next video.